What if I told you that the retirement plan you've been trusting for 20 years is designed to fail you? I know that sounds dramatic, but here's what I discovered last spring. And it shook everything I thought I knew about building wealth. I was sitting in a coffee shop in Denver, 43 years old, portfolio manager by day, thought I had it all figured out, you know. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus, old college friend. We hadn't spoken in maybe 5 years. Can we talk? He texted. It's about my dad. We met that Thursday. Marcus looked exhausted. His father, Robert, had just turned 70. Retired 3 years ago after 42 years as an engineer. Solid career. Steady contributions to his 401k. Did everything right. He's going back to work, Marcus said quietly. I didn't understand. My dad saved for 4 decades. Over $600,000 in his retirement account. He thought he was set. Marcus pulled out his phone. Showed me a spreadsheet. He's burning through $70,000 a year just on basics. Medical bills, property tax, inflation on groceries alone went up 40% since he retired. At this rate, he'll be broke by 78. I stared at those numbers. Robert had done everything the system told him to do. Maxed his contributions, diversified his portfolio, waited until full retirement age. And still, it wasn't enough. He's interviewing for part-time security jobs next week, Marcus said. After 42 years of engineering, that conversation haunted me for days. Because here's the thing everyone misses about retirement planning. We calculate based on today's expenses, today's cost of living, today's healthcare prices, but retirement isn't today. It's 20, 30, 40 years into a future where every single one of those numbers will be violently different. I started digging, pulled data on over 12,000 retirees across the United States, looked at their projected versus actual expenses over the first decade of retirement. The gap was staggering. 83% underestimated their costs. The average shortfall? $215,000. $215,000. That's not a rounding error. That's a catastrophe hiding in plain sight. And suddenly, I realized something that made my hands cold. I was making the same mistake. I went home that night and opened my own retirement calculator. You know those tools, right? The ones that promise to tell you exactly how much you need to retire comfortably. I'd used the same one for 8 years. Trusted it completely. Plugged in my numbers. Current age 43. Retirement age 65. Current savings $412,000. Monthly contribution $2,000. The calculator blinked green. Congratulations. You're on track for a comfortable retirement with an estimated annual income of $92,000. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt sick. Because I knew what those calculators don't tell you. They assume a static 3.5% inflation rate. They assume healthcare costs grow at the same pace as everything else. They assume you won't live past 89. All of those assumptions are fairy tales. I started calling people. First was my Aunt Linda, 72, retired teacher, 28 years of service. How's retirement treating you? I asked. There was a long pause. I'm substitute teaching again, she said. Started last fall. I thought you had a pension? I do. $42,000 a year. Sounds decent, right? Except my prescription drugs alone cost $18,000. Property insurance doubled. And I still have 17 years left on my mortgage because I refinanced in 08. $42,000 minus $18,000. $24,000 left for everything else. For an entire year. Next, I called Daniel. Former client. Retired at 62 with $900,000. Aggressive saver. Smart investor. Living the dream? I asked. He laughed. But it wasn't a happy sound. I'm scared every single day, he admitted. I thought 900 grand would last forever. But I'm spending $110,000 a year. I didn't account for my wife's memory care. Didn't account for our daughter losing her job and moving back in with her 2 kids. Didn't account for our roof needing replacement after that hailstorm. How long do you have left? At this rate, maybe 6 years. I'll be 68. Then what? I hung up. Sat in my car for 20 minutes. These weren't reckless people. They weren't gamblers or spenders. They had followed every conventional rule. Save 10%. Diversify. Wait for compound interest to work its magic. And still, they were running out. I pulled up my own projections again. This time, I changed the variables. Inflation at 5% instead of 3.5. Healthcare costs rising at 8% annually. Long-term care expenses at $6,000 a month. Lifespan to 95, not 89. The number that appeared made me nauseous. I wasn't on track. I was headed for the exact same cliff as Robert, as Linda, as Daniel, and I had 22 years to fix it. The next 3 months were chaos. I couldn't sleep. Every financial article one read contradicted the last one. Retire on $500,000. You need 3 million to be safe. Social Security will cover you. Social Security is going bankrupt. I started seeing a pattern, though. Every single piece of mainstream retirement advice had one fatal flaw. It was built for a world that no longer exists. A world where pensions were guaranteed. Where healthcare didn't cost more than a mortgage. Where you could buy a house for $80,000 and retire in the same town you were born in. That world died 30 years ago. But the advice didn't. I decided to do something extreme. I tracked down Catherine Marlowe, retired economist, 79 years old. She'd published a paper in 2019 titled, "The Retirement Mirage: Why Traditional Planning Models Are Obsolete." It had been completely ignored by the financial industry. We met at her home in Portland. Small garden, books everywhere. She made tea. "You're the first person under 50 who's ever asked to meet me about that paper," she said. I told her everything. Robert, Linda, Daniel, my own collapsing projections. She nodded slowly. "You know what the real problem is?" she asked. "It's not that people aren't saving enough. It's that they're saving for the wrong future." She pulled out a graph. "Look at this. Median retirement savings in the U.S. is $65,000. That's catastrophic, yes. But even people with $800,000 are struggling. Why?" I didn't have an answer. "Because the system trains you to accumulate a number," she continued. "But it never teaches you how to convert that number into sustainable income during the most expensive, most vulnerable phase of your life." She leaned forward. "Tell me, what's your plan for healthcare between 65 and Medicare eligibility if you retire early? What's your plan if your spouse needs memory care for a decade? What's your plan if property taxes triple in your area? What's your plan if inflation stays above 4% for the next 15 years? I had no plan. None. "That's the illusion," she said quietly. "Everyone thinks retirement is a finish line. It's not. It's a 40-year expedition through the most expensive terrain of your life. And most people show up with a map from 1985. She handed me a folder. "This is what I did differently. And this is what you need to start doing now." Inside were strategies I'd never seen in any mainstream financial publication. Inflation-hedged income streams, geographic arbitrage calculations, healthcare cost firewalls, sequence of returns risk mitigation. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't simple. But it was real. "The people who retire successfully in this era," Catherine said, "aren't the ones with the biggest portfolios. They're the ones who plan for chaos instead of comfort." I left her house with that folder. And for the first time in months, I felt something shift. Not relief. Determination. I rebuilt everything. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But methodically, piece by piece. First, I stopped trusting retirement calculators. Instead, I created what Catherine called a chaos budget. Worst-case scenario planning. What if inflation stays at 6% for 10 years? What if I need long-term care at 75? What if my partner and I both face major health events simultaneously? I mapped it all out. The number I needed wasn't the comfortable 1.2 million the calculators promised. It was 2.3 million. Almost double. That was terrifying, but at least it was honest. Next, I restructured my income strategy. Most people think retirement income comes from one place: your portfolio. Wrong. I split mine into 3 streams. Stream 1: inflation-protected assets. Series 1: savings bonds. Treasury inflation-protected securities. Real assets that moved with the cost of living, not against it. Stream 2: geographic flexibility. I started researching lower cost of living areas. Not for now, for later. Places where property taxes were reasonable. Where healthcare networks were strong. Where I could cut my annual expenses by 30% without sacrificing quality of life. Stream 3: delayed income. I pushed my Social Security claim age to 70. That increased my monthly benefit by 32%. Permanent raise for life. Then came the hardest part. Lifestyle calibration. I didn't slash my budget. I didn't become a minimalist. But I made intentional trades. Sold the second car I barely used. Cancelled subscriptions I'd forgotten about. Redirected that money, $1,800 a month, straight into inflation-hedged investments. Over 5 years, that's $108,000. Compounded over 20 years? It's the difference between running out of money at 79 or living comfortably to 95. I also started building what I call a volatility buffer. 3 years of living expenses in cash equivalents. Not invested, just sitting there. Why? Because the biggest killer of retirement portfolios isn't inflation. It's sequence of returns risk. If the market crashes the year you retire and you're forced to sell assets at a loss to cover expenses, you never recover. But if you have 3 years of cash, you can wait out the storm. Let your portfolio rebuild while you live off your buffer. It's boring. It's conservative. It works. 6 months after rebuilding my plan, I called Marcus. How's your dad doing? I asked. He's still working part-time, Marcus said. But honestly, I think he's okay with it now. Gives him something to do. I paused. Marcus, can I show him something? No pressure. Just a different way to think about the next phase. We met the following Sunday. I walked Robert through the chaos budget. The 3 income streams. The volatility buffer. He listened quietly. Then he said, I wish someone had shown me this 30 years ago. You can still use it now, I told him. It's not too late to adjust. He nodded, and for the first time since Marcus had told me about his dad's situation, I saw something in Robert's face that hadn't been there before. Not relief. Control. Here's what I learned. Retirement isn't a number, it's a system. And the system most people are sold is designed for a world that doesn't exist anymore. You can't retire on hope. You can't retire on outdated calculators. You can't retire on the assumption that everything will stay stable and predictable for 40 years. You have to plan for chaos. Not because you're pessimistic, because you're realistic. So here's what I want you to do right now. 3 things. Simple. Actionable. First, stop trusting generic retirement calculators. Build your own chaos budget. Assume higher inflation. Assume higher healthcare costs. Assume you'll live longer than you think. The number will be bigger than you want. But it'll be honest. Second, diversify your income streams. Don't rely on your portfolio alone. Add inflation-protected assets. Consider geographic flexibility. Delay Social Security if you can. One stream breaks? You still have 2 others. Third, build a volatility buffer. 3 years of living expenses in cash. Boring. Safe. Essential. It's the difference between weathering a market crash and destroying your retirement in year 1. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm saying it's necessary. Because the worst financial mistake you can make isn't losing money. It's reaching 70 and realizing the plan you trusted for 40 years was never built for the reality you're living in. Robert is 72 now. He's still working part-time. But he restructured his spending. Built a buffer. Adjusted his withdrawal strategy. He'll be okay. Not because he had the biggest portfolio. But because he stopped pretending the old rules still worked. And started planning for the world as it actually is. If this story gave you a different lens on your own future, consider subscribing. Every week, I break down the money lessons no one talks about, the ones hiding between the headlines and the hype. Thanks for staying till the end. Your time, just like your money, compounds. Until next time, may your plans be honest, and your future be resilient.